On this episode of Locked On Lightning, we're discussing tonight's game against the Chicago Blackhawks. The Lightning kick off a 3-game road trip. Talk all about that. But first, let's play that music.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Tanker. I want to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. On this episode of Locked On Lightning, we're talking about tonight's game against the Chicago Blackhawks. The Lightning kick off their 2023 campaign, and we're almost at the halfway point now with the season. And I have to say everything is good. I have to say that this team is playing, or not really playing their best hockey, because I think there's obviously a lot of more games that need to be played. So, the Lightning can and are very capable of taking their play to another level. And that all starts here in the month of January. I've spoken about it on the show numerous times over the past couple of weeks, how and even over the past month, really, I at the beginning of December, I spoke about and I stressed very much how important December was going to be, because of just, if you looked at the schedule, very tough road for the Lightning at that point. And January definitely does not get any easier. They're facing off against Chicago tonight, who, I'll admit, one of the worst teams in the league. But still a team that you shouldn't sleep on. I don't think there's really a team in the NHL, like in years past. You may have had a couple of teams here and there in which, you don't have to go out there and play your best hockey against them. And if any game was a testament to that, you could just look at the last game of 2022 for the Tampa Bay Lightning, that win at home against the Coyotes, in which, if you just looked at the score, you would have said, all right, 5-3. I mean, we kind of figured that, but like I said, that was a weird enough game on the last episode to where that I feel like that could have gone either way if the Lightning if they weren't able to play discipline down the stretch of that game. But they come in tonight's game against Chicago Blackhawks, one of two of a back-to-back. And I'm not so much worried about this game. I am worried about, not really worried, but I am curious, as I always am, about having a couple of days off, what kind of Lightning team we're going to get tonight. Excuse me. We've talked about it about on this show, especially over the last couple of weeks. We saw it when the third week of December, the Lightning pick up big wins against Seattle, Columbus, and Montreal. Have a couple of days off to kind of rest, but at the same time, you're looking for your team to carry that momentum, considering you have two big games coming up on a back-to-back, and the fact that those games are both division rivals. You definitely want to continue that, and the Lightning end up losing both of those on the road to Toronto and Detroit. And I've spoken about it numerous times on this show as to, the Lightning aren't the best of teams. And I will definitely start keeping count of that, because I'm really curious when you get down to the numbers, what their record is when they have a certain amount of days off. But this is a game where I think that, and I will predict right away that the Lightning will get off to a slow start. I think that the only thing that will keep them in this game in the first 10 to 20, because I could see them allowing, a couple of, nonsense goals, goals off turnovers, turnovers in their own zone, just leaving Vasilevsky out to dry. I could see that happening. That sometimes, more times than not, seems like it's the case when the Bolts play teams that are not nearly as good as them. And really, that's why I'm looking at Andre Vasilevsky or just the goaltending in general, because, who knows, maybe Cooper will like to start Elliott, but I think Elliott will get the start tomorrow night, and then we'll get Vasilevsky on Friday against Winnipeg. So I think tonight, Vasilevsky's performance will tell a lot about where he is at this point in the season. His numbers are very good right now. I don't have a problem with the way he's been playing. As of now, he's 16-9-1 with a goals against average of 2.42, save percentage of 921, which is good. He got off to a slow start, as we all know, and he started to get better and better as the season progressed. And really, that's what the important thing is here. And so now going against a team like the Chicago Blackhawks, who are basically limping coming into this game, and I cannot stress that enough. They have a record of 8-24-4. It's good for 20 points on the season. You have a 1-9-0 record over your last 10. That only win coming against Columbus, who is one of the other worst teams in the league. I think that, and even if you look at some of these games, when you look at a team that's been on a current losing streak, a team that the Lightning will play, I tend to always look at, okay, they're losing games, they're not that good, but are they at least playing close games to where they're giving themselves a chance? And you look at their last 10, Chicago, and they're pretty much averaging about 2 goals, one to 2 goals a game. Their last loss coming off against San Jose, and then previous loss to that is Columbus. Both of those games, they combined for 3 goals total. And then you see them go up against the better teams, the Vegas, the Minnesota, the Rangers. Pretty much every team that they've played on this stretch is definitely better, but I'm looking at the teams that are at least at the upper echelon of the NHL rankings, and I'm looking at teams like Carolina. Like I said, I'm looking at the Rangers. I'm looking at Vegas. I'm looking at Washington. And in all those games, in the Carolina game, they were shut out 3-0. The Ranger and Washington game, they gave up 7 goals each in that game, which gives me the impression that their goaltending is horrendous this year. Which, if you look at the goaltending for Chicago, that pretty much tells the story. You have Mrazek with a record of 2-10-1, goals against average of 4.19, with a save percentage of 878, and then their backup stat lock, 4-4-1 with a 2.73 goals against average, save percentage of 918. So that tells me that really, excuse me, that they're not playing their backup enough, and they're really, really trying to get Mrazek going, which in this situation, I don't think is a good idea for them. And really, the Lightning will have to, once they weather that storm, that early 5 to 10 minute storm, which we are all accustomed to by now, and when the Lightning play lesser teams, is we always get the scrappy performances from these teams, and the Lightning, as always, I would like to see them get off to a good start, but I feel like this will be more of Tampa having a couple of days off, them playing against a team that is not good, and really we're going to see what kind of game this is going to be for Andre Vasilevsky, because I believe really at the end of the day, the Lightning, I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if they're a little sluggish in this one, and this comes down to Vasilevsky winning this game for Tampa Bay. So we'll talk more about this game. We'll talk about some of the players on the Chicago team in just a bit. But first, I want to talk about today's sponsor, and I want to remind you that today's show is brought to you by BetOnline. Now, betonline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season to basketball and NHL. They've got it all at betonline.net. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. So once again, I want to thank everybody for making us your first listen of the day. And if you haven't already done so, please go ahead and like and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. We're also available on YouTube, so hit that subscribe button on the channel, drop a thumbs up, hit the notification bell, and drop a comment below. So as soon as the newest episode drops, you will know and will be allowed to comment on it and let us know. Once again, on the last episode, the previous episode, we spoke about expectations for 2023 for the Tampa Bay Lightning. I said I firmly believe that the division is well within grasp. I think that the Lightning can not only catch Toronto, but I firmly believe, I think that if they continue to play the way they do, I think that we could see them make a run for the division against Boston. Now, that will kind of rely on how well Boston plays down the road. But right now, we're just going to focus on what's in front of us. And what's in front of us tonight is the Chicago Blackhawks. The Lightning, like I said, start a 3-game road trip in the Midwest and up in Canada. Excuse me. And looking at this roster for the Chicago Blackhawks, I look at the roster, I look at the lines, and I think to myself, what in God's name is going on in Chicago? Because when you look at this roster, you look at the players, the names on this team, I'm almost shocked, really. I mean, I know we spoke about in the last segment, the goaltending has been horrendous, but you look at some of the players on this team, and I'm kind of curious as to what's going on. I've watched some Chicago games here and there. I've not seen them give up a goal or score a goal in terms of, I've tuned in and out to certain games here and there, but I've only seen, I guess between goals in those games. And my impression of this team is that they're just underperforming, that maybe it's coaching right now. You look at the top 2 lines, especially Tyler Johnson, former Lightning player, Max Domi, Patrick Kane. And then on that second line, Karashev, Taves, and another former Lightning player, Taylor Radish. And yeah, I wouldn't expect that Chicago would be, anywhere near a playoff position, but to be almost dead last in the NHL, given some of the names on this team, I mean, you got Jake McCabe, Seth Jones, Connor Murphy, Jack Johnson on your defensive pairings. Colin Blackwell on that fourth line with Bo Kachuk, Andreas Anastasio, which, the guy's been in the league forever. I still can't pronounce his name correctly. But what I'm trying to get here is that I think, really what this seems to me, and you look at the stats of the players on this team, Patrick Kane leading the team in points with 27, no surprise there. Jonathan Taves with 20, Max Domi with 24, Taylor Radish with 14. To me, really what it comes down to is that really this team, just the goaltending, the defense is not there for them. Their special teams, without even looking at the stats right away, their special teams isn't getting the job done. And really now looking at the stats, their power play percentage is atrocious. 22nd ranked in the league, only 20%. Their PK is also not that good as well, 73%. That ranks them 24th. Their goals forced is not good. I mean, they're barely averaging. They're not even close to 2.5 a game, and it's surprising. It really is surprising. At the same time, it doesn't help when you're giving up almost 4 goals a game. So, like I said, the goaltending is really what is the weak spot for this team. We've seen teams where they're not big time scorers, but they've somehow found ways to win. And that's pretty much what this Blackhawks team to me, just looking at the roster, looking at their stats, looking at their what they have done on the season in terms of points and all that stuff. They strike me as a team that takes a step forward and takes 4 steps back. And they don't, it seems to me as though is that they don't get clutch scoring. If they get down early, that's pretty much all she wrote for them. They strike me as a team that you have a lot of guys doing a lot of things, but you don't really see any production coming from that. It could be coaching scheme. I mean, we all know that the Blackhawks are a little bit in the midst of a transition. There's been tons of talk about Patrick Kane getting traded this year. I quite honestly don't think that's going to happen given the salary cap of a lot of teams. Jonathan Taves as well might be on his way out. So, I mean, the Lightning are running into a team who is kind of just in a weird situation right now at this time with their franchise, and which way they're going to go, whether that be towards making the playoffs or taking a step back and rebuilding. So you kind of have a team, looking at the roster, like I said, you have Max Domi as well, who I think is a very talented player. You look at this team and you kind of see this team kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out on what they want to do. And really, it's going to be curious to see, because I wouldn't be surprised if, and this doesn't really have much bearing on what the Lightning do. I've always said the Lightning just need to go into games, not worry about what the other team is doing, just play their game, and the rest will fall into place. But I wouldn't be surprised, I kind of alluded to this earlier in the episode, that we will see a very tough Chicago Blackhawks team early on in this game, a very feisty Blackhawks team early on in this game. So I wouldn't be surprised if, like I said, in the first half of this episode, first 5 to 10 minutes, the Blackhawks look like a team to be reckoned with, and the Lightning are kind of on their back heels. I mean, we could also see the other side of that, and that's the Lightning completely, it's a close game for the first 20, and then in the second period, kind of something what we saw in the Coyote game on Saturday, is we see a close game for 20. We get 10 minutes into the second, and the game's pretty much already decided by then. I think if I had to bet money, it would probably be that situation, that scenario. But like I said, I think all these players on this Lightning team have been playing well lately. I was having this conversation with a listener actually last night, and they asked me who my midseason, even though we're not near the midseason point technically yet, but I always look at New Year as kind of like the midseason point. Who's the midseason MVP? They said Brandon Hagel, which I don't have a problem with that. I think Hagel's been playing very well. But my opinion, and if you've been listening to this show recently, I'm high on the Braden Point train right now. So I would have to give it to Braden Point. But when you look at this Lightning team, everybody's been playing well as of late. I think that only things could get better, and all the pieces are starting to fall into place. And I think that really the last puzzle piece, or the last variable in this equation, for the Lightning to really become that team, because like I've stated in this episode, in the past episode, the goal right now is not only to catch Toronto in the division, but is to catch Boston. And I feel like the last variable in that equation, in order for the Lightning to take their play to another level, would be 88. I think if Andrei Vasilevsky, as well as he's been playing, as I stated his stats before, I think if he starts to really turn things on, because like I said, he's been playing well, he's been playing very good, but he hasn't been playing great, and he hasn't been playing elite level yet. And if he could get to that, and we could start to see that in 2023, not only can we see, and I spoke about this 2 episodes ago, not only can we see the Lightning make a run at the Boston Bruins in the Atlantic Division, but down the road, potentially get back to the Stanley Cup final. So wrapping things up here on the show, excuse me, I'm dealing with once again a cough or some sort of cold, or I don't know, but playing hurt. But anyway, here we are. So the Lightning, like I said, are playing the Chicago Blackhawks tonight, an 8:30 start, and then tomorrow a little bit later as well, a 9:30 start in Minnesota, and then they meet up with the Winnipeg Jets on Friday at 8 o'clock. So once again, as I feel about every road trip, I feel like every road trip is very important, especially against when you have a top team like the Winnipeg Jets waiting for you at the end. It's that more important for you to get things going early on in the road trip. So going up against Chicago, as like I said, as poorly as they've been playing, you still got to go out there and play hard and play discipline. You still got and take advantage of the opportunities that are afforded to you, especially on special teams. As like I said, Chicago is not that good on the special teams. And then you got Minnesota tomorrow night, one of the better teams in the Central Division. Excuse me. And then you got Winnipeg. And then next week, kind of get a little bit of a reprieve. You got Columbus at home on Tuesday. That should be, I'm going to say right now, no disrespect to Columbus, but the Lightning should win every matchup this year that they have against Columbus. No excuse. No excuse whatsoever. And then they got Vancouver on Thursday, another team who has not been playing well at all this year. And then you got St. Louis, a feisty team, on next Saturday. And then you start to see an uptick in talent. Plus, the St. Louis game marks a long road trip in the Pacific Northwest and Canada. You got Seattle on Martin Luther King Day. Excuse me. And then in Seattle, and then you got Vancouver, Edmonton, and Calgary, and then you're back at home for a 3-game set to round out the month against Minnesota, Boston, and LA. So not a terrible schedule. Glad to see that the Lightning will get a little bit out of their comfort zone during this month, because I've stated how well the Lightning have played at home thus far this year, 15-4-1. We will start to see them playing more games on the road. So 8-7-0. Excuse me. So, really this is where you'll start to see to test their merit. They'll start playing at, weird times, a little bit later, at least on their clock. So you'll start to see how maybe they could adjust to that time difference as well, because, it's no easy task to ever ask a team to go on one of those Western Conference road trips and be able to compete at a high level, especially against all these teams, no matter who you are. A lot of teams struggle on the West Coast, but the Lightning swept their West Coast trip early on in the year. And so we have another one. So very curious to see how they fare this time around. So we'll be covering all that obviously as it unfolds. So make sure to like and subscribe to the podcast. Once again, give us a follow on our social media pages at @LO_Lightning on Twitter, as well as @LockedOn_Lightning on Instagram. You could give me a follow at DenkyDank, DENKYD8NK. If you want to hit us up with comments, questions, or mailbag questions, go ahead. You could hit us up on our YouTube page. Just drop a comment below this video, or you could even message the show on Twitter, or even message me with your mailbag questions. And we will be back tomorrow to recap tonight's game against Chicago, as well as preview tomorrow night's game against the Minnesota Wild. So in the meantime, that's been it for this episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Danker. I'll talk to you in the next one.